My Gran slippers were on the wrong feet. That was the first thing I noticed when I pulled into the driveway. She was standing on the porch of the new place, looking out at the water, and her left slipper was on her right foot. She hadn't noticed. She was just standing there, holding her cardigan closed against the October wind, watching the lake like she was trying to memorize it. I sat in the car for a second before I got out. I didn't want to cry in front of her. I'd already cried twice on the drive up from Toronto, once somewhere around Barrie, once when I passed the Tim Hortons where she used to take me every Saturday when I was little. Double for her, hot chocolate for me, and she'd let me eat the Timbits in whatever order I wanted, which felt like freedom when you were 7. She was 81 years old and her slippers were on the wrong feet, and she was the best person I'd ever known in my life. I got out of the car. I should back up. My Gran, my dad's mother, had lived in the same house in Sudbury for 53 years. Same street, same neighbors, same kitchen with the yellow curtains she'd sewn herself in 1974. My grandfather died when I was 12, and after that it was just her in that house, which was way too big for one person. But she refused to leave because she said the garden knew her. That's exactly the kind of thing she says. For most of my adult life, I'd been the one who called her every Sunday, who drove up on long weekends, who sat with her through her hip replacement and her cataract surgery and the 2 months in 2021 when she had a bad fall and couldn't get around on her own. I'm the one who learned how to cook her pierogies the right way because she has strong opinions about pierogies. I'm the one who knows she sleeps with 3 blankets even in summer and that she can't watch anything with subtitles because she finds them stressful. My uncle, her son, my dad's younger brother, had lived in Calgary for 20 years. He called her at Christmas and sometimes on her birthday. His wife sent a poinsettia every December. That was the extent of it. I want to be fair about this. He had his life, his work, his kids. People get busy. I understood that. But when I tell you what happened, I want you to have that context. I want you to understand what a year of my life went into that house by the lake. The idea started because of the kitchen fire. Gran had left a tea towel too close to the stove burner. She's done it her whole life. She has a very relaxed relationship with stove safety. And this time, it actually caught. The fire was small and she dealt with it fine. She wasn't hurt. But the smoke damage in the kitchen was significant, and her insurance assessor found some other things while he was there. Outdated wiring in the back half of the house. A slow water leak under the bathroom floor that had been going on long enough to cause structural concerns. The furnace was from 1989. The estimate to fix everything came in at just under $90,000. Gran's pension is decent. She worked as an administrative coordinator for the school board for 31 years. But it's not $90,000 decent. The Sudbury house was paid off, but it wasn't worth what it would cost to make it livable again. Not really. Not safely. I'm a project manager. I spent 8 years working in construction development, mostly residential, and I know what things cost and what things are worth. I ran the numbers about 40 times over 6 months. I talked to a financial planner. I talked to a real estate lawyer. I talked to my Gran many times, in many kitchens with many cups of tea. And then I did something I hadn't told anyone except my Gran. I bought a cottage on Lake Huron. Not a grand place, not Instagram-worthy, but solid. A 3-bedroom, year-round build on a quiet stretch of water about 40 minutes outside Kincardine. Good bones, updated mechanicals, a covered porch that faced west so you got the sunset over the water every single evening. I spent 14 months and $260,000 between the purchase and the renovations, turning it into somewhere my Gran could actually live. Grip bars in the bathroom that didn't look like grip bars. A kitchen layout I designed specifically so she could reach everything from her walker without straining. A bedroom on the main floor. Heating system that could handle a Canadian winter without her having to think about it. I also set it up in a life estate arrangement. The property was in my name. Gran had the legal right to live there for the rest of her life. No conditions, no one could touch that. When she passed, it would revert to me. I'd paid a real estate lawyer in Owen Sound to draw up the paperwork properly. I'd also prearranged 5 years of property tax payments because I knew her and I knew she'd worry about being a burden. I told her in March. She cried. I cried. We ate pierogies. The plan was to bring her up in October, once I'd finished the last of the interior work and the weather was still decent enough to enjoy the lake. I told her we were going to dinner. She loves a good excuse to wear her good brooch. And I drove her up the escarpment with the windows cracked so she could smell the air changing. When we turned onto the lake road and I slowed down, she looked at me. "Where are we going?" she said. "You'll see," I said. Is this a kidnapping? Gran, I'm just asking. I pulled into the driveway and she went quiet. She got out of the car before I could come around to help her, and she stood on the porch and looked at the water, and that's when I saw the slippers on the wrong feet. I gave her a few minutes. Then I went and stood beside her. It's yours, I said, for as long as you want it. She didn't say anything. She reached over and took my hand and held it with both of hers, the way she used to when I was little. I cried in front of her after all. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon, I got a call from my Gran. She sounded strange. Not upset exactly. Careful. The way she sounds when she's trying to figure out how to tell me something she thinks I'm not going to like. Your uncle and his wife are here, she said. I was at my desk in Toronto. I had a site report open on one screen and a contractor dispute on the other, and for a second I didn't process what she'd said. There, at the cottage, yes. How did they… I stopped. You gave them the address. They asked, she said. I didn't think. It's okay, I said. It's completely okay. When did they get there? Yesterday. They said they wanted to see the place, to celebrate. She paused. They've been here since yesterday morning. There was something in her voice I didn't like, something careful and tight that she was working very hard to keep out. I'll come up this weekend, I said. There's no rush, she said. I'll come up Saturday, I said. I drove up Saturday morning, left Toronto before 7 so I'd missed the highway traffic. I had a bag of groceries in the back seat and a folder on the passenger seat. The folder had been in my car for about 2 weeks, actually. Since around the time I finished talking to the lawyer, I don't know exactly when the feeling started. It had been building slowly, like a smell you can't place, but you know isn't right. My uncle had called me once after I told Gran about the cottage. Just once. Just briefly. He'd asked a lot of questions about the property, the value, whether I'd spoken to anyone about the tax implications. I'd answered his questions and he'd been friendly, and I'd hung up feeling strange in a way I couldn't name. So the folder was already in the car when Gran called me. I turned onto the lake road. It was early November now, and the trees were bare and the water was steel gray and flat, and it was very beautiful in that specific Ontario way. That's beautiful and a little melancholy at the same time. My uncle's rental SUV was parked in front of the cottage. There was a car I didn't recognize parked beside it. I sat in my car for a moment. Not long. I picked up the folder. I put it under my arm. I got out. My uncle opened the door before I knocked. He looked good. He always looks good. He's one of those people who seem to get better looking as they age, which I find mildly annoying. And he smiled at me with what appeared to be genuine warmth. There she is, he said. Come in. Come in. My Gran was sitting in the armchair by the window. She looked fine physically, but she was holding her tea with both hands and she wasn't quite meeting my eye. My aunt was in the kitchen doing something at the counter. There was a man I didn't know sitting at the dining table with what appeared to be paperwork in front of him. I looked at my uncle. Who's that? I said. That's something we wanted to talk to you about, actually, my uncle said. He had his reasonable voice on. I've heard it before. He uses it in family situations when he's decided he's right about something. Why don't you sit down? I didn't sit down. Who is that man? I said. My uncle glanced at his wife, who had come out of the kitchen and was standing with her arms crossed, which is a posture that tells me everything I need to know about her relationship to conflict. He's a property consultant, my uncle said. We've been talking about the best way to handle the asset. Handle the asset, I repeated. This property, he said, the cottage. We've been looking at options, and honestly, it makes the most sense, financially, to convert it into a short-term rental. Seasonal, probably, though year-round is possible. The Kincardine market is very strong right now, and we could get anywhere from… No, I said. He blinked. I'm sorry? No, I said again. I said it the same way the second time. Calm, even. That's not happening. My uncle's expression did something complex. He took a breath and he shifted back into his reasonable voice. But there was something underneath it now. Something tighter. I understand you put a lot into this project, he said. And we're all so grateful for that, we really are. But as a family, we have to think practically. Mom can't actually live here year-round alone. It's not realistic. The winters up here are brutal. She'd be isolated. We'd all be worried. She won't be alone, I said. I've arranged check-ins. The neighbors know her. We have a plan. A plan isn't the same as, this is my property, I said. The room went quiet. My uncle looked at me. Then he looked at the man at the table. Then he looked back at me. The property is in her name, he said. He said it carefully, like he was reading from something. As the next of kin, the family has a... The property is in my name, I said. Not Gran's name. Mine. She has a life estate, which means she has the right to live here for the rest of her life, and no one can take that from her. But the property itself is mine. There is no family claim. My uncle stared at me. I opened the folder. I have a copy of the title here, I said. I set it on the table. I also have the life estate documentation, which was registered with the Ontario Land Registry in September. I have documentation of the property tax prepayment. I looked at the man at the table. Whatever you've been telling him, he should know that there is no mechanism by which this property can be rented, sold, or otherwise dealt with without my signature. I am the registered owner. The man at the table picked up the document I'd set down. He looked at it. He looked at my uncle. He looked at the document again. My uncle's wife had uncrossed her arms. She was very still. You were going to rent out my Gran's home, I said. I looked to my uncle and I kept my voice, even because I have learned, from 32 years of being his niece, that losing my composure in front of him gives him something to work with. A home I built for her, without asking me, without telling me, while she was sitting right there. My Gran, from her armchair by the window, said nothing. She was looking at the lake. My uncle started to say something about how he'd had Gran's best interests at heart, how he was worried about her, how no one was trying to do anything underhanded, how he wished I'd consulted the family before making unilateral decisions about something that affected everyone. I let him finish. The consultation happened, I said. Over 14 months, with Gran. She was the only person who needed to be consulted. The property consultant left first. He packed his papers quietly and I held the door for him, and I thanked him for his time, which I think surprised him. My uncle and his wife left about 20 minutes later. There was a conversation in the kitchen that I wasn't part of, and then my uncle came to find me on the porch. I hope you understand I was coming from a place of concern, he said. I do, I said. For Mom. I know, I said. He stood there for a moment, like he was waiting for something more. Then he nodded and went to his car. I stood on the porch until the sound of the engine faded down the lake road. When I went back inside, my Gran was still in her armchair. I sat on the footstool in front of her, and she looked at me for a long time without saying anything. Did you know, I said, that he was going to do this? I suspected, she said. When he started asking about the lease market? You should have told me sooner. I know, she said. I kept hoping I was wrong. I nodded. Are you upset with me? She said. Never, I said. Not once in my life. She reached out and fixed a piece of my hair that had come loose on the porch. She does this. She's been doing it since I was 3. No matter what is happening, she will find something small to fix. Your grandfather would have been very angry, she said. At me? At his son, she said. Very, very angry. We sat there for a while. The light on the lake was doing that thing it does in November, when the sun is low, where the water looks like pewter and the sky is a different shade of gray, and together they make something that isn't pretty, exactly. But it's true. There are things I think about. Now, I think about the fact that my uncle hadn't called Gran in 4 months before showing up at her new home with a property consultant. I think about the fact that his first question to me when I told him about the cottage was about its market value. I think about the fact that he never once, in the 2 days he was there before I arrived, took Gran out for dinner, or asked her what she thought of the lake, or asked her if she was sleeping okay in the new place. He was there to assess an asset. That's what he was doing, and she knew it, and she couldn't say it, because he's still her son, and that doesn't stop being true, no matter how old you get or how many times someone disappoints you. I made sure the locks were rekeyed the following week. I didn't tell Gran why. I just told her I was having the hardware updated. She looked at me over her tea. Good idea, she said. She knew exactly why. The last weekend of November, I drove up again, and we raked the leaves along the waterfront path. Or rather, I raked, and Gran supervised from the porch with her coffee and offered commentary. And we cooked a full Sunday dinner in that kitchen I built around her. And in the evening, we sat on the porch in our coats and watched the last of the light go off the water. My uncle had sent a text that week. Short, not unfriendly. He said he hoped there were no hard feelings, and that he thought the place was really lovely, and he hoped Mom was settling in well. I showed it to Gran. She read it. She handed my phone back. She said, which is the most diplomatic thing she was willing to say about it. The porch faces west. You get the whole sunset without having to crane your neck. Gran had a wool blanket over her legs and her coffee in her good mug, the one with the blue glaze she bought at a craft fair in 1998, and she was watching the water go dark. She wasn't thinking about the text. She wasn't thinking about my uncle or property values or short-term rental markets. She was watching the light change on the lake the way she used to watch it through those yellow kitchen curtains in Sudbury, like it was something worth paying attention to, like there was nowhere else she needed to be. That's what I built it for. That's the whole thing, right there. People ask me sometimes if I regret putting the property in my name instead of hers. They mean well when they ask. They're thinking about the optics of it, about whether it looks like I was protecting myself more than I was protecting her. I understand the question. I've sat with it. But here's what I keep coming back to. The life estate wasn't about me. It was the one structure that gave her genuine security without giving anyone else a door to walk through. If her name had been on that title, there would have been a door. And my uncle had already shown me very clearly that he was the kind of person who checks for unlocked doors. That's not cruelty on my part. That's just paying attention. I think there's something people don't talk about enough, which is that protecting someone you love sometimes means making decisions that look cold from the outside. The folder, the lawyer, the prepaid taxes. None of that looked warm. It looked like paperwork. But warmth without structure is just sentiment, and sentiment doesn't hold up in a property dispute. I learned that from 8 years in construction, honestly. The kindest thing you can do for a building is give it good bones. The kindest thing you can do for a person you love is make sure no one can take their home. My Gran spent 53 years making a home out of yellow curtains and a garden that knew her name. She deserved to spend her last year somewhere that was actually hers. Not hers in the way that depends on everyone being decent, because you cannot count on everyone being decent, but hers in the way that holds up in court. What my uncle did wasn't monstrous. I want to be honest about that. He saw an asset and he moved toward it. That's a very human thing to do, and it doesn't make him evil, just small. What I've learned is that smallness has consequences. Not dramatic ones, not cinematic ones, just quiet ones. He doesn't get Christmas at the lake. He doesn't get the Sunday dinners or the pierogies or the way Gran laughs when something actually catches her off guard. He traded all of that for a conversation with a property consultant that lasted maybe 40 minutes before I walked in the door. That's the transaction he made. I think about whether he knows that. I think he probably doesn't, which is its own kind of loss. For my part, I don't think of what I did as sacrifice. I think of it as arithmetic. I added up what mattered and I protected it. The work was long and sometimes it was lonely, and there were weeks when I was managing contractors and running numbers and fielding awkward questions from my uncle, and I would have given anything to just not think about it for one day. But then I'd think about her slippers on the wrong feet and her watching the lake like she was memorizing it, and I'd go back to the spreadsheet. You build what you want to keep. That's all. You do the legal work and you pay attention and you show up. And eventually you get to sit on a porch in November watching the light go off Lake Huron with the person you built it all for, and nothing that happens in a dining room with a property consultant can touch any of it. That's enough. That's more than enough.